quite a bit without code. There is still space for the nerds or the coders to be effective in the platform. Raz, I think, and Danish, I think you already played the video from the folks at the Microsoft product team around PCF and ProDev strategies. Microsoft has reinforced that they're not done with us. In fact, there is a lot of investment in making our lives easier, in providing us better tools to do what we do. So there is space in the industry for us. Today, what I will talk about is essentially liquid developments for Portals professionals. So we're gonna have a look at the language itself. It's gonna feel a lot like a programming a logic course. So we're gonna look at operators, and we're gonna look at the details in the language, and then at the end we're gonna have a demo on how you can put together everything that we learned today. I don't want to be over optimistic. I think 1 hour is not enough time for us to really dig deep into it. But I mean, have this as an introduction to Liquid, and my contact and the contact for other folks in the industry will be available throughout the session, and you can always reach out to us for more questions. All right, without further ado, let me put my slide deck up. And let me know when you see it. Oops, wrong screen. Sorry, folks. All right, if you can see it, please give a shout or let me know that you can see my screen.
Yeah,
There we
that's
go.
great.
All right, so again, my name is Victor Dantas. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I take a lot of pride in being a 365 Saturday ambassador, and we can call it now the Power Community. I take a lot of pride in being one of the ambassadors. I am also a Microsoft Community Solutions Architect and Power Platform Consultant. If you want to have access to my profile on LinkedIn, you can just scan the QR code, and there you have it. All right, so the objects of the session today, we're going to look at, we're going to build some solid Liquid skills, understand the technology, programming capabilities in PowerApps Portals. We're going to establish good practices. I know that there is another guy, I think his name is Arpit. He's going to be doing another session on Portals as well this weekend. So I believe he's going to extend a little bit more on good practices. And if time allows, we're going to have a view of the future in in PowerApps Portals. I hope your meal there, I think it's Juca. I hope your meal is good. All right. Again, the agenda, we're going to have a look now at PowerApps Portals under the hood. What it is, a web template within Portals, Liquid, Liquid.net, then tags, operators, types, portal objects, and filters, and then a common usage of them all together. All right, under the hood, PowerApps Portal was originally built using ASP.NET. The last version that we have access to is the community version edition. I think it's version 8.3 of Portals. Portals now on 9.2. So the latest code that we have available was built on .NET Framework 4.7, but I don't know what is available today on the PowerApps Portals because we don't have access to code. But I can tell you for certain that it's still a .NET based technology. All right. And at the time that we had access to the source code, PowerApps Portals was built using forms, ASP.NET Forms, and ASP.NET MVC. Portals today is built using Bootstrap 3.7, so we are not yet on Bootstrap 4. Okay, and it uses jQuery already embedded on it. All right. So before we move further, I think it's important for us to understand how this thing is wired. Again, Portal, as we just look at, uses .NET technology, but Portal is a combination of the binaries, if you will, as well as data. So at any given Power Apps portal, you see these entities available as soon as you install it. Today, we're not going to look at how to provision portals. I have videos online, and there are other folks who have published around step-by-step instruction on how to provision one. But as soon as you provision, this is what you see in your dynamics as additional entities to your CDS, if you will, CDS database. So you're gonna have websites. Websites are related, have related entities to it: web pages, site settings, content snippets, web files. Then web pages have web page localized content. This is to facilitate multi-language setup. Then pages use page templates. Again, when the original version of Portals and still to this day, page templates are the way for you to pretty much design your page around how you expose both data and the structure of the page itself. It used to allow us to add .NET pages to it. Today we can only use liquid and web templates, and that's the focus of this session. Following that, attached to a page, you can have entity forms, entity views. There's one other entity that I didn't put there, but it's also available, called web forms. And then a page template, as just mentioned, can be of two types. It can be a rewrite page template, which points to an ASP.NET page. That would be an ASPX page. And then web templates. Again, because we cannot add any more files to the final binary on PowerApps Portals, we can't really extend Portals much using the strategy of ASP.NET pages. So the only thing we can really use is web templates. And then breaking out a bit on web templates, you have what can be actually used, or the technologies that you can use to extend a page on the portal is HTML, JavaScript, and Liquid. So the focus of the session is Liquid. So before we jump in, look into code, I want to break down a little bit more and explain a little bit more on the web templates entity and the data structure. All right, so let's have a look at that real quick, and then we'll come back to the slide deck shortly here. So when you add a portal, provision a portal to your CDS, you're gonna get two apps in your apps list. The first one will be the portal itself, and you have this icon that makes a reference to it, the little circle representing the web. And then you have a portal management, which is a model-driven app pointing to your CDS. So if I click to open it, the first view of the management, portal management model-driven app is this. So it's gonna list your website. If I were to open here, you'd see pages, you'd see content snippets, site settings, web link sets for the menu, site markers, page templates, so on and so forth. As just mentioned on the slide deck. If I skip all the way down to web templates, you see a list of things that were already pre-built and available when you installed Portals. If I click to add a new web template, you see the main fields for the template: the name, the website that uses it. As you maybe know already, you can have multiple websites attached to one single instance of CDS. You have the source of your template. Again, this can be HTML. It can also include scripting, JavaScript. The good thing with this editor is that you get a little bit of IntelliSense on the editor already. And then there is a field here called MIME type. If you leave this blank, your pages will always be rendered as HTML. But you can also fill that in and provide different MIME types to your page. And what that facilitates us, this comes handy is essentially if you want to create a web template that spits out different content than HTML. So for example, if you want to spit out XML, if you want to spit out JSON, you can use the MIME type for that matter. In fact, we're going to look at an example that does that. All right. So let's hop back to the slide deck. So a little bit on Liquid. Liquid is was created by a company, a Canadian company called Shopify. They have e-commerce technology. So when ADX was rethinking the strategy around web templates, mostly to facilitate SaaS offering of ADX portals, they decided to use Liquid to be this template server-side language to be used. So instead of you uploading different files to your portal offering, you'd be able to quickly make changes to an existing template using Liquid. The offset of that language that was used for portals is called liquid.net. And again, it's a .NET based version of Liquid. There are discrepancies between the two versions, and we'll look at it. The ones that I've found throughout my career. Now, it's not very many, but know that there are different um, versions, if you will, or different functionality between the two languages. And then finally, here's a link to the PowerApps Portals documentation. The page itself, I find it very useful. There is quite a bit there. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for you to consume it all in one run, but there is quite a bit. So I would strongly recommend you to refer to it. It's not like a wiki page or a help page where you can click and navigate and see a whole lot of samples, especially on the heavily used stuff. But it's a good starting point. And a lot of what you're going to see in this demo is a reference to what's available in the documentation. Um, I should mention this also. If there is anything that you find on your own journey and you don't see on the documents page, let me know. There is a professional, I forgot his last name, I think his first name is Nikita, that's also available on LinkedIn. He's a Microsoft employee. So he oversees the fast track team for portals, and he's always open to suggestions on how we can make the page better, this documentation page better and more useful. All right, so when we first look at Liquid, this is essentially what you're gonna find there. Liquid is composed by tags and flow instructions, control flow, iteration flow, structures, objects, and filters. This is what you're gonna see when you look at it at first. This will remind you, if you have been a coder for long, this will remind you of ASP.NET Razor, MVC Razor, where you see a mix of tags that are mostly server based and then HTML content embedded to it. That's essentially what a template language does for us, or allows us to do. Basically, mix and match server instruction, if you will, and content all in the same piece of code. If you have used classic ASP, you see that as well. A lot of server-side tags and then HTML tags and JavaScript all in the same place. You may think, oh, this is confusing, it's a mess. I mean, this is what's being used today. I can't really advocate if it's the best scenario, but what I can tell you is that being a template language, I think Liquid really fits the bill for what it's attempting to do. And what we're going to see today is that a lot of the functionality that Liquid provides actually makes our life much easy, very easy when it comes to placing controls and placing HTML content around the page. All right. So the basic operators to Liquid are similar to what you see even in C Sharp. Equals equals, exclamation mark equals for different, greater than, less than, etc. But then some of the other operators are not as similar. So the and uh, operator, if you will, it's more verbose instead of the and or the pipe for or. You have other operators for contains. You have start with, ends with, again, stuff that you could do differently in C Sharp, but this, in my opinion, is easier to use than what you'd see in C Sharp. You have size. Size is a very generic operator, if you will. It acts more like a method or function. It's similar to count in C Sharp, and it can be used for strings. It can be used for collections, so on and so forth. One thing that's very interesting about Liquid is how it processes empty strings or a empty array or a null object or false boolean value or even checking the size of a collection. If you set up an if statement and if you say, for example, if my collection and you don't provide any other operator, it will assume that you are testing the size or the contents of your collection, whether your collection doesn't have items or whether your collection is null. Again, we're gonna look at code and you understand what I mean. And then finally, there is one particular control flow that's called unless, which is revert an if statement. And again, we're gonna have a look at that shortly here. All right, so let's jump right into Liquid and let's look at some examples. Again, like I said in the beginning, this will feel a lot like a logic college class, but I think there is value in looking at the language with having that perspective. So this is a template I created called Hello World. And what I will do is I'm going to open the portal on another window and we're going to look at the output of this particular instructions that we're going to see on Liquid. So give me a moment here to connect, to open the portal, and we're going to dive right in. All right, so let me try to overlay one window against the other, and we'll try to do it side by side. So cool. I'm logged on to the portal using an admin credential. Again, the purpose of the training is not really to teach you how to set up a portal, how to use admin accounts. We can do that at another time, but to show Liquid itself. So I'm logged in as admin, and you note here that I have opened this particular page underscore service.about, and the reason being is because as I make some changes to my code here, I'm gonna clear the cache so that I can see the result on my page. Web templates are not part of the cache today, so changes to web templates would require us to make to clear the cache to see the result right away. So the first tag you see here is a comment. We don't use backslash to comment code. You have to use the tag. You see comment and then end comment right here at the bottom to close my comments. I have provided this code snippets ahead of time and tested so that we don't have any surprises. So what I do first is I'm going to show to display this particular if statement. So here what I'm testing is if the user is logged on, which means that this user object is not null. That's what this particular if statement is doing. I can then access properties of my user object. All right, so let me save and then come back here and clear the cache. So hello, and then the user that I'm logged on with is called Antonio Dantas. That's his name. So quick thing on the structure of Liquid. The curly brackets and %sign indicates that I have a tag. My tag can be a control flow, or an iteration flow, or a tag. We're gonna look at different tags here shortly, and then I start putting HTML content right after, and then I use double curly brackets. This is to indicate that I want to print a value out from Liquid or from server side to my HTML. And then the pipe indicates that I'm going to use a filter. Filters in Liquid will resemble functions a lot of times. And in this case, my function is uppercase. So I'm just making the results uppercase. All right. So let's have a look at another instruction here. So in this particular one, it's this this control flow is called unless, and unless will work in the opposite way as an if statement. All right. So this particular HTML block will only be printed if the full name does not contain Dantas. So in this scenario, I don't get anything. But if I were to get this link and open another browser window in which I'm not logged in, I would see the hello world message and I would see that particular div. So fairly straightforward. And again, the unless, it will do the opposite of what an if statement would look like. So quickly jump back to the slide. Let's have a look at data types. So Liquid has string, number, a boolean, array, dictionary, datetime, and then the no comparison. String, very straightforward. Number, you don't really get to define what type of number that you are declaring to be used, but you can use filters when you want to present that number. For example, if I declare a variable and assign a decimal value to my variable, I can then expose that variable in my template as an integer. And we're gonna look at that when we look at Liquid filters. Booleans, true, false, yes, no, I think enable is disable is also considered to be a boolean in that fashion. You can have arrays, you can have dictionary, datetime, and again, the null comparison that we just looked at in the beginning, where null can also mean zero, false, collection without items, a string that's empty. All right, so it treats that particular comparison the same way. All right, so let's have a look at types. In my example, I have some types here. I'm gonna put my comment. I'm just gonna remove this tag for a minute. Actually, let's leave it here so that it'll make a whole lot of confusion. So let's have a look first at how I can declare a variable and then variable types. All right. First of all, you have this assign tag. Assign will not only create the variable but assign value to it. So suppose that my full variable is declared up top here, and I want to also change the value based on an if statement. If I want to do that, the instruction for changing the value is also assigned. Okay, so if I want to make this full bar along the progress of my script, I also use assign. There is no full equals to. It just doesn't work. Your script will fail, so you have to reuse assign. Okay, it's not as if it's declaring the variable again. In this scenario, it's just reassign a value to it. If you want to append to your variable, then you would use a filter for that. So append test. So that's that there. There's also another way to assign or create a variable, and that's using capture. Capture comes in handy when your contents or the contents of your variable use special characters, or if it's a multi-line particular scenario. So within this particular structure between capture and then capture, wherever is put into this block becomes the contents of your variable. And then in the following line, what I'm doing here is I'm printing out my variable, and then I'm replacing the new line character that we don't see here. I'm replacing that with HTML BR. All right. Okay. In strings, so when I'm declaring a string, I may or may not use quotes, and it works either way. So with quotes, without quotes, it does work. So you're good to go there. Then the instruction here is to print those two variables. Then if I'm using a number, like I said shortly here, I can declare my number as an integer or a decimal, and then I can use filters to decide how to print. In the beginning, I talked about filters or the discrepancies between the .NET version of Liquid and the original version of Liquid. If you look for a filter called integer in the original Liquid language, the one from Shopify, you don't find it. I couldn't find any. Same thing for decimal. So this is special case for the .NET version that we use. If I want to round a number, I can use round, which is a filter, and tell the number of decimal places. So let me save this guy here, clear the cache, go back to my page, and we would see the end results here. All right, that's bar for my variable that I printed way up here. Then I'm being captured. You see how it replaced with BR. If we were to inspect, we'd see the BR instruction here. Then I have my strings and then numbers. So I printed my numbers. You see the difference between them, 3, 3. So floor, we rounded the decimal number, floor. Then integer performs the same functionality in essence. Decimal just reprints the value of my variable, and if I want to round, so it just rounded pi to three numbers, three decimal numbers. All right, so moving on, let's have a look at dates. And that's another thing that's different between the original Liquid language and the .NET version of it. The .NET version of Liquid uses the format string based on what you see in .NET. If you see examples in the Liquid documentation from Shopify, you see that this format is a lot different than what the Microsoft documentation talk about. So save time for you. If you're looking for a particular format, look for it in .NET, and then you can replace the string here. Don't use the Liquid version. All right. So there you have it. I have an object called page, which is the page that I'm on when it was last modified. Then I print that here, and then I have the now function or object, if you will, and then I'm formatting a bit different, and then printing that on my screen. Comment. Let's throw that in here. And then you have arrays. I created this particular arrays with string options, and then I do a split, which again is a Liquid filter. Anything you see after the pipe is a filter. Then I break out that array, and I'm iterating through that array. So you have a for speaker, very simple instruction. One cool thing about Liquid is this though. If you do not want to test the size of your array and you want to provide a specific message when the array is empty, you can do this. So in other languages, sorry, I don't have to. So in other languages, you'd have to do an if statement to test the size of your array before iterating through to provide that message. Liquid provides this else control flow within a for loop. There is no while loop in Liquid, so whatever you need to do that you need while, you have to figure out a way to use a for that. Liquid also has dictionaries, so you can look at the parameter collection within the request and print that. So let's save and see the results. Sorry, forgot to clear the cache. I guess I lied. So that's a difference here too. This is completely possible on the regular Liquid. So let's go back here, clear cache. All right, here's my array, and the dictionary has 94 parameters. All right, so far so good. Hopping back to the presentation real quick, let's see where we are at. So we looked at some control flow Liquid tags. If unless case when, we're gonna have a look at case one actually. We're gonna have a look at the iteration flow, for loops, table row, and we're gonna see a particular thing about table row, templates, tags, FetchXML includes blocks, so on and so forth, and then finally CDS entity tags. All right. So for that, I have a template here called Liquid tags, and I'm going to navigate to that particular template. All right, we're gonna cruise through this one here. And again, if I'm going too fast, please let me know. All right, so this particular instruction is just to illustrate the use of case statement. So in this scenario, I'm assigning a value to 3, and then I'm testing my case statement, and the else will display the result for that scenario because my variable is not 1 nor 2, so it's neither 1 and 2, so my number is 3. That's what you see on the screen here. That's an example of a switch statement, if you will, or case statement for that matter. We have some iteration flow here, very similar to what we saw on the other page. Let me do this here a bit. Oh man, the editor is not helping me. Let's refresh the screen real quick. All right, so I have an array of strings, and then I'm looping through the strings, and I add a comma after that, so that's the result. Then Eshiash, Raz, Victor, and then there is an additional comma here at the end. Um, on my for loop, I can use parameters. So in this example, I'm using, on this particular for loop, I'm saying, look at the collection and then limit my loop to 3 items in the for loop. So here's the result. So it's picking the first 3 here. I can also use offset. So in this example, I'm jumping to the 3rd position of the array, and then starting to print after that 3rd position. So everything starting from Victor forward is printed here. All right. Then I have another example called reverse. So in this example, I'm using 2 instructions, and that's what I meant when I said the language is really handy when it comes to templating websites. And what I mean by that is, so I have an instruction called reverse. What it does is simply reverse the order of my array. So it will print Ambash, Omar, Scott, Victor, Razi, Ash, and Danish first. But I'm also adding another instruction here called cycle. And what it does is, as I print my items on the screen, it's going to cycle through and then use those options as I print them. So this is what you see here. These variations based on the cycle that I use. I mean, if you're working with, active menus and collections that you want to display items in a different way, and if there is logic, so think about it when you print a table on your website, you want to show dark row, light row, dark row, light row. You can use cycle for that. I mean, in my opinion, it's fairly handy. Another thing that you see with for loop instructions is that within the for loop, you have access to an object called for loop. And what it does is it allows for you to check whether or not your item is the first or last in the collection. So again, if you're using Liquid to expose JSON content, and if you want to spit out an array in that JSON content, if you want to maintain the structure of the array, this again comes in handy because you don't want to add an extra comma to that array if it's the last item, and then therefore break the structure of the array. So you can use the for loop object for that, and this is the result. For my first item, I added a bunch of stars, and then I checked to see if it was the last, and then I prevented adding the particular comma here at the end. Now, table row is supposed to be a for loop that has a table, the TR and TD HTML embedded to it. This is part of the Microsoft documentation, but it's not working when you try to use that on the portal. So it's something that I need to connect with the portal folks and let them know. But again, it's part of the Microsoft documentation, but the particular tag does not work. All right. And if it did, it is supposed to work this way. You declare a table, you open your HTML table tags here, and then by doing this, it would imply that you were creating a TR and adding a particular value to your table rows. All right. All right. Template tags. This is where the money is, if you will. These tags were created by Microsoft, I should say by ADX Studio at the time, to facilitate us implementing or exposing data from CDS to portals. In this scenario, I have a particular FetchXML here that's looking at a table, an entity called accomplishments. This particular entity comes from the higher ed accelerator. And what I want to do is I want to look at the user that's logged on, okay, using this user ID. Again, let me expand my screen so that it's easy for us to see it. So I want to look at accomplishments by this particular user, the user that's logged on. All right, I have columns here. Plain fetch XML. Then this is the way that you actually execute the query. All right, and when it's done, I have declared or I have created this table, just plain HTML, and then I'm looking through the results of my fetch XML and then printing the results on the screen. You're gonna see a few things here, and this is part of the Microsoft documentation itself. Because I'm looking at an option set, I have access to the option set label and also the value. Again, if you want to look at the value, you use value. If you want to look at the label, this is how you see it. So let's have a look at the result set. So this is my list of accomplishment for the user that's logged on. The accomplishment here, and then the type, which is the label for this particular option set. Now there is another tag, and we're gonna see that in more detail in a few minutes. That's called include. The include tag allows for me to inject, if you will, another liquid template within the template that I'm using. In this scenario, I am invoking, if you will, I'm gonna use some technical terms that may seem familiar to you just to facilitate the lecture. But what I'm doing here is I'm using the contents of this particular web template, and I'm passing parameters to my template. So this is the name of the variable or parameter within this particular template, and this is the value that I'm providing to it. So let's have that template. So the name, what was that name? History. So I'm creating a fetch query, and I'm assigning the results of that query to a variable called course history results. So if I switch back to the template we are looking at, you see that I'm using this include. I'm referencing the name of the template, passing the parameters, and then all the way down here, you see that I consult the results that were assigned to the particular variable that's created here. So course history results is not declared on this liquid tags template, it is declared here and populated here, but I'm using that variable in my for loop. And this particular variable will be available all the way throughout this consuming template, if you will. This is usually the way I organize my fetch queries. If they're reusable, I always put them on a template so that I don't have to recreate these instructions. And if there are changes to it, I just change it in one place. So that's how I do it. Again, if I scroll down, you see the results for course history, the grades for this particular user, which is referenced here in this template. All right. So let's have a look at another template with a more complex query. So I have a query that has an inner join. I have results columns that are part of this secondary entity, but I'm assigning all the results to this variable called scholarship. Same way that we did the previous one, just a different template with a little bit more color or details to my fetch. All right. So how do we display that information? So here I make a reference to the scholarship results variable, and then down here you see that I'm referencing the alias that was used on my FetchXML and then the name of the field. All right, so again, if I go back to that template, you see that I use a inner join, and then all the way to the side here, you see that I've established the alias for that entity, and that's what I refer as my my result. All right, so moving on. Now, Liquid does not really provide a way for us to create methods in the same way that C# or any other language would do, or functions if you think more on the JavaScript scenario. But there are interesting ways that you can set up your templates to act as if you have a function. And that's what we're gonna see on this particular example here. So I have a template called liquid template method. Let's have a look at the instruction itself. So what this guy is doing is essentially I am querying dynamics to return the result of scholarships associated with a particular student. Then I declare a variable, set it to 0. Then I look through my collection, and then I'm doing a sum of all the potential dollar amount associated with scholarships that this student applied to. So, I mean, I could do that using aggregation in Fetch, but in this example, I just want to show this example on using plain, simple liquid to just aggregate a total amount, all right? So just looping through the collection, starting with my variable equals 0, then for every record, I go ahead and I add this particular field to my variable, all right? And then on the page that consumes it, because I know the name of my variable, I can make use of that result in my HTML. Okay. Again, if I move to the side, there is a filter here just to round the result, but I'm referring to the variable that was created in this particular template. So let's have a look at the result. So the total amount for this particular scholarship will be the sum of these guys. So 10, 13, 14, 0.5, $14,000 and $14,500 is the potential for this particular user. And then I can reuse this template throughout my application if I have to find the results for different users or to print this result in different pages. Again, not very well structured, but you could still somehow, create methods or functions that or pieces of code that you can reuse using Liquid. All right, moving forward, I mean, I'm really short on time, so let me cruise through here. Microsoft makes available specific tags that pertains to CDS. All right, and this is very important for you to dive into and learn more about these tags. Editable tags will be used for content in your page that you want particular power users to be able to change. So as a website admin, when I hover over this particular area represented by this editable tag, I can make changes to the content using the front-facing components. So page copy simple So now I made change to content, and all I did was adding this editable tag and then pointing to a particular field in the page object. You can do this with the other types of fields depending on which entity are being surfaced here on your page. Then I have another editable tag that uses content snippet. This is the content of my snippet, and if I were to open uh, content snippets, you'd see that there as well. So let's find the name of this thing. So the name is sample snippet. You see my content snippet here and the details. My super sample snippet. That's exactly what you see here. My super sample snippet pro unlimited power. So power users will be able to make changes. I think that the best scenario to use snippets is for content that you know that users will change often. Instead of you having a developer making the change, you can always use save time of the developer by empowering your power users to make those changes for you. Then moving on, the entity list tag. This actually refers to objects um, in your CDS application. I hope most of the folks who are watching this, they are familiar with entity lists, entity forms, and so on and so forth. But what it does is exposes Dynamics views to portals. So in my scenario here, I have an entity list that points to the account table or entity, if you will, and I can define which view, CDS view I wanted to expose, and it's using this college university entity list. All right, and in my template, I'm querying and displaying the total amount of records available, and then I loop through the results of that entity list and display the result as a table. So instead of me doing a fetch, I just refer to an existing Dynamics view and I display the results here. So it saves me time. Again, if you know that you're going to change, or the end users have a potential to, the end users, by what I mean by that is like power users of CDS or citizen developers. If you know that citizen developers will change the filters of a particular query or view, instead of embedding your fetch XML on the template, you can do an entity view and then have the citizen developers manage the results or the filters for those results, if you will. So again, going back to the website, you see my list of universities here, and then the details on how many records existed there. All right. This is referencing the entity list. You can also use an object called entity view. They are very similar, but the entity view allows me to refer to any entity in Dynamics and any view that exists in Dynamics without having a need to create a record for the entity list object. So in this scenario, I'm referring to the contact entity. Then I'm pointing to the active contacts view. And in here, I'm going to do an example using a filter on my variable called batch. What it does is I look at the results and I'm batching the results in 4 items per time. So I'm creating a batch of 4 results per cycle, if you will. So what it does is it's going to loop through my batches, and then I loop through the contacts within that batch. Again, this comes in handy for specific objects that you have a particular type of display that you want to display on your page. So I want to display the first 4 with a particular color, or within a column I want to display the next 4 a different way. So that's the way it works. So the result looks like this. So I'm displaying 4 items, then the next 4 items, and then whatever many are left after that. So if I had to use a particular programming language that it would be a lot harder than just creating the batch. So this, I think it's really, really cool. So the last instruction that we're gonna look at in this particular CDS snippet is the entity form. All right. On an entity form, I can point to a entity form that is created in Dynamics and just expose a form here on my page. And that's the form that you see here. It's a form from the account entity that has this particular fields set up. All right. So I have 2 more minutes. Let me cruise through and just show an example of a template and open for questions real quick. This is a template I created using both components from the PowerApps portal and then a little bit of liquid templating. So a lot of this stuff is HTML, as you can see, but then down here I have a reference to an entity form and then to a particular chart. So what this page looks like is this here. So that's my student panel. You see that it's only one template, and because I'm mixing both the components that already exist in Dynamics, entity form, entity list, so on and so forth, I can create a template and say, depending on how this template is used, surface the entity form that I have associated with the page. So this is my entity form. And again, the same template, but now dynamically I'm exposing a list. Then I can click here again, another page with another grid, and then another page with another grid. But the template itself is the same, as you can see here. So the whole template is the same, and then I check for the page that I'm using this template for, is there an entity form? Yes, there is. What is the ID? You use it to present my information. And then, last but not least, the short tag. I'll save this here. I have a little bit of jQuery here. I'm going to clear my cache. And you see that you can expose charts from CDS over on your web page form as well. All right, let me hop back to my presentation. I think we covered almost everything. So there are some other functions here depending on the types that you're using, date, add, hours, minutes, months, so on and so forth. Some math filters as well to facilitate calculation. There is no, variable plus variable. You have to use a filter to provide that functionality. Some filters for collection. We just saw the batch, but there are many others. URL also, if you want to find URL, you want to create a parameter to your request, so on and so forth. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm over time.
Yeah, we don't have much questions, Victor. We just have one question, and that's a request actually.
Okay.
So Sarita has asked if you can share the templates somehow with
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah, we can do that. I have it saved. I'll see if we create a page somewhere with this template so people can use.
Okay. Well, there were a couple of other questions that just came up. This is from Pavan, and the question is: can Power Apps Portal completely replace advanced customization possible using ASP.NET MVC?
So it's a tough question. I mean, at this moment, I would say no, because we have a limitation in terms of the CRUD operations that you can perform on Power Apps Portal. Right now, you can only save, edit, or delete data using the out of the box components, entity forms for that matter. That's the only way you can place data back into CDS. But I think, by the end of June, I don't know the exact date, or maybe July, Microsoft is releasing the web API for portals. So, creating, editing, and deleting records will be easier for us to do. So at that point, I'd say you can do pretty much anything using
That's
PowerApps Portals.
there were
And go ahead.
there were a few other questions, but I think so we are already over time. So I
Okay.
don't know. I
Yeah,
don't want to.
if you can copy, I mean, I'll have a look at the questions offline and then reply to people directly. Um,
Thank
yeah.
you, Victor. It was nice. Most of the functions even I didn't knew existed, so it was nice to have this session. Thank you, Victor. It's always pleasure to have you. But so now we are gonna move on to Benedict, who is one of the PCF champions. He has been developing a lot of controls on PCF